Welcome back, painters. We're doing some Artrage Vitae today. That's Artrage's new mobile app. It sits somewhere right in between traditional old Artrage mobile and Artrage desktop. Biggest differences are with brush sizes, canvas sizes, and some of the settings, especially in the oil brush. So what I'm doing today is just using every tool in the toolkit, starting with the glitter brush of all things. I never use the glitter brush. In fact, it just seems oddly out of place in the tool set. But I was on Instagram a while back and I saw my friend Chad Weatherford. He is an artist that does some visual development for like a game studio, or I can't remember if it's a game or movie studio, but he does finger painting on his iPad and on an old iPad that doesn't even support the Apple Pencil, and he uses a glitter tool every once in a while, and his finger paintings in Artrage are amazing. So I was like, I gotta try this. So glitter tool portrait, here it is. It looks kind of cool. I like how the scattershot texture of the paint blends together in a really nice soft way. It sort of looks like rapid pointillism, and it's cool. It's super cool. And I like how then you can grab the palette knife and knock it down and smooth out some of that really chunky texture that you get with it. That's one of the things, you kind of get like a lot of texture and it might be too much. So you know, you have choices. You can knock it down with the palette knife, but you can also knock it down with the watercolor. So the watercolor will kind of act as like actually like real liquid fluid that you put onto that chunky paint, and it sort of just masks it down. And the way that that works is based on paper texture. So if you have that nice rough canvas that I had initially, it kind of blends really naturally with that texture of the glitter. But then if you get really soft paper, maybe like a soft watercolor paper, it'll just totally neutralize that texture. So you might want to find that balance between paper texture and the tools you want to use. It's kind of a thing where you kind of got to just test it out. I liked the canvas texture the best, but I just decided to stick with the softer paper here. And I turned on real color blending before I started this painting. You just click down and the color wheel, like right at the center of that little hub down there, and you can click on it and just, it's like a checkbox, real color blending. And that's what you see happening here as I blend that cool blue color on top of those warm skin tones and start getting all this awesome color bleed, and it looks beautiful. Real watercolor feel from Artrage. Very, very impressive. Like I said, I'm working in every tool in the toolkit here, and I'm just playing with the idea of portraiture, painting out of my mind, not using any references or anything. So just kind of seeing where things go. Again, you guys have seen me 1,000 times painting with the oil brush. That's my go-to, and you can see it with the real color blending. You can see it blending into the watercolor, into the whatever it's called, the glitter paint. And all of those things working together in such a cool way. The oil brush is still and will always be my favorite Artrage tool. I have faith that they're going to keep upgrading the other tools in the toolkit, but that oil brush is the moneymaker for Artrage. That's what I love about it, and you can see why. Just awesome, awesome stuff. Now I'm using the chalk pastel, or it's like a chalk pastel Conte crayon, and if you with the really chunky glitter, if you push gently, it'll kind of smudge it out softly. But if you put full pressure with your Apple Pencil or if your finger, it'll just fully neutralize that texture, just like the watercolor will. So texture is a big thing in Artrage. It's another element to kind of juggle, but it's also another asset that you have in communicating what, something a little unique. I always have people tell me that my digital art looks so traditional, and that's partly just the way I paint, but it's also somewhat the tools that I use. Artrage and a few other tools out there, like Rebel also is very good at making things look traditional. They're really awesome. And I love that you can paint with this really strongly traditional feel and on mobile as well. And I know sometimes people point out like other apps like Realistic and different things. And I have some reviews coming in for those eventually, but I really just don't find a lot that competes um, with the way Artrage works as a package. It's really great, and the mobile version is super cool. So here I'm using the pen tool, default settings, and the pen tool is crazy. To be drawing on top of all of this texture with something that's so clean and crisp like the pen tool is just, It's just weird. It just is a crazy contrast. And then using the similarly soft um, and kind of smooth pencil tool, it's just kind of a fun thing to play around with all of these variety of textures. The pencil tool works just like a pencil. It's a great tool also. And the pen tool has great line quality. It's beautiful. With the Apple Pencil, it's very accurate. Um, the marker tool works like a marker, and it's good for, in this case, like that soft shading that you get, like the occluded shadows that are around the nostril flap, around the nostrils and stuff like that. Um, so a little bit of everything here, just getting to see how it all works. This tool is really cool. It's called the Gloop Tool. It's sort of like if watercolor was, you know how you get that like dark edge bleed when you watercolor paint? It's like if that dark edge actually had um, like color dodge put into the blend mode, so it would get both darker and more saturated at the same time. It's kind of like extreme watercolor. And then you get the paint tube, which just gloops out loads of paint, and then you can knock it down with a palette knife. And then again, the palette knife just blends everything together. The palette knife in Artrage is one of my very favorite tools. I wish every single art program in the world had Artrage's palette knife. I wish they could just license it out to everybody. You know, you have like Photoshop, and then you have a little like add-on that's like Artrage palette knife, and you have that in your tool set. It would just make Photoshop so much better, right? I think that would be wonderful. So using the palette knife as both like a blending tool and a painting tool is always fun. And you can see here that like the paint is still so chunky, and it was crazy to paint with that much texture initially, and I just decided eventually just to knock it all down. I liked it, but I also wanted to embrace a little bit more like risk in this painting, and so I wanted to just wipe away everything, keep painting, almost like have multiple versions all painted on top of itself. Sort of like, yeah, like, you know, if you've ever gone to any of those historic sites where you're like, oh, I'm at the Pantheon or the Parthenon or something, you know, like when you listen to the tour guide, they can tell you that they found structures beneath, and you know, it goes back 10,000 years or whatever, and this was a holy site, a site of worship for people that go all the way back. I thought it'd be fun to try, you know, nothing as grandiose and as epic as that, of course, but just to try to paint a portrait on a portrait on a portrait on a portrait using the same tools, and just kind of see what happens. And the palette knife was a great way to sort of clean the slate. I also love how it gives you a pretty dang big variety of marks with the palette knife, so you don't have to, it doesn't look redundant, you know. That's one of the things that with like Procreate, for example, I like using Procreate too, it's a good tool, but the tool interaction is, it's like so predictable. There's not enough like randomness for it to feel like real wet media. um, I always feel like that's a great drawing tool, but Artrage is a great painting tool, and that's really a huge deal to me. I'm a painter. I don't prefer drawing. Like, drawing is fine and it's good and it's great, but I like that wet media experience way more than the dry media experience, and so I very much gravitate toward those sorts of apps. Like when I, you know, from my own stuff. When I'm doing instruction, I'm happy to instruct using Procreate, happy to instruct using whatever, you know, whatever's out there. But for my own stuff, I like this. I like this really messy feel, and I like to exaggerate that. You know, of course, you can use Artrage in a very controlled and very like drawing oriented way as well, but I really feel like it shines in this capacity. So I'm going back in with the pen tool again and just kind of seeing how I can clean this mess up, so to speak. And I'm just curious how this is going to go and if this will even work out. So hopefully, we'll see. The pen tool is great also for adding in highlight, just like if you've ever, you know, I've got a friend of mine, and you know, we're both pretty like come from very traditional oil painting backgrounds. So when we're painting in oils, you know, we don't think we can be experimental, but sometimes, you know, after you varnish the thing and you get it all set, one time I just started using a gel pen, like a really high-end kind of gel pen on top of my oil painting because I felt like my highlights weren't strong enough. And when I did that, I felt like it was some sort of like I don't know, like a sin or something, you know, like is this allowed? But I had a lot of fun with it, and so it's funny how sometimes the traditional informs the digital, informs the, you know, and they kind of work back and forth in this circular fashion. And I was thinking about that, and I started using like this white pen in Artrage, which acts sort of like a gel pen, right? Like a paint pen, to add in highlights. You get these crisp little dots for the reflections in the eyes and stuff like that. So really fun. Um, just don't feel like you're limited. You know, it's like it's called a pen, it's called a pencil, it's called oil paint, but really it's just a different way of making a mark. And the marks are should be categorized in your brain not so much based on like their physical painting counterparts or their actual art tool counterparts, but think about them and categorize them in terms of um, hard edge versus soft edge, texture versus smooth, um, wet versus dry, you know, like the blendability of it. And then if you have those sorts of either or, black and white kind of categorizations, it helps you think, well, okay, do I need a little bit more texture right now? Well, how can I get that? Here are the tools that do that for me. Or do I need something that's a little bit more, you know, just like a blending tool? What's a good one for that? Well, like the chalk pastel is great for that. Or, you know, so it's not just the palette knife. That chalk pastel is an amazing blending tool. If you ever just need to knock down a transition in a value or color, you can use that chalk pastel and boom, just one mark and it just softens just beautifully, right? Or if you need that crispy pop of just a little detail that you're just, you know, you don't want to be messing with the size of your oil brush to get it down to the teeniest, just use the pen tool and flick that little highlight into the reflection on the eyeball. It's totally fine, and you're not breaking any rules, you know, it's not real paint, even though it really does a great job of pretending to be real paint. So just get out of it what you want to, get the effect that you want to. And that's part of this, is that I thought, what if I did a painting where I use every tool together in just a playful way, you know, just kind of doing an illustration more than like a portrait, you know, and what could come of it, and how will the tools work together, and how, you know, stable is this release of Artrage Vitae and all that. So for me, I found it to be very fun, very fruitful, a good sketchbook exercise, like a digital sketchbook exercise. This is a perfect one. I'm going to use every tool in the painting, you know, and have like one theme, like, oh, I'm going to paint a portrait, or you can say, oh, I'm going to paint a pear, or I'm going to paint a still life, or I'm going to paint a landscape, but I'm going to make myself use every tool just to kind of see what's possible. Um, when I got to the end, I just was remembering how much I love blue and that kind of cerulean blue where it tends toward a little bit of green, and so I just started painting a ton of that and making it look like some kind of blue fire, oceanic something, I don't know, just having fun. But as you can see, when I do stuff like this, I end up gravitating toward the oil brush even when I'm trying to use everything else. But it's good for me. It's good for me to mix it up, and I hope it would be for you too. So as a review of Artrage Vitae, I haven't really gotten to a point where I can do a full-on review of it, but I can say that I do think it's a much better version of Artrage Mobile. And the reasons are the same as I said before, which is that you just have bigger canvas sizes, bigger tool sizes, and that alone is for me a thing that I need when I paint. Because, you know, every once in a while, painting mobile, you do get lucky and you get something you want to print and sell or whatever, and, you know, make duplicates of, and you can't really do that in the old version because it's, I mean, you can, but like you have to use so many brush strokes to get coverage because the brush size is so much smaller than the canvas size I want to work, etc. But with this version, it's just perfect. You know, you can use the biggest of the big and perfectly awesome, um, appropriately sized brushes for giant canvases, and um, it's stable, and it's it's awesome. I think that the other thing is that the oil brush is just way better with all the different settings. I can replicate my desktop setup there. Um, I know that they're always working on making more stuff and updating it and making it better. For me, it's a good upgrade, and you know, I don't know how you guys feel about kind of like rebuying the app. But it's, I think for what it is, it's a good upgrade, and I think it really lets the experience of painting in Artrage be a lot more like the desktop, which is also cool for me, to not have to switch my brain into a different mode when I'm working between the two so much. Things I think that would be great for the future of Artrage would be maybe just some more equivalence with the rest of, maybe the iPad apps, like for undo and redo, and different like gestural kind of inputs, and other things I think could be great for the future of Artrage on mobile, or in general, is just to keep developing the other tools. I think the oil brush is far and away the most sophisticated and beautiful and professional looking tool with versatility, etc. But I think some of the other tools need that same treatment. I think maybe the watercolor or like a charcoal tool, like a dedicated charcoal tool would be perfect. For me, if I draw, I want to use charcoal, and I'd love to see that in the toolkit too. I'd love to see watercolors get a boost. I'd love to see pencils have more like settings for not just like the marked style, but maybe the richness, that's sort of simulating like a 6B versus an HB pencil. Those would be some of my thoughts. But I love it, super fun. Thank you for watching, and great app, and thank you all for your time. Best wishes.